At the divorce hearing, my wife, the co, looked proud. "You'll never touch my money again." Her lover said, "That's right, sweetheart." Her mother smiled. "He doesn't deserve a cent." The judge opened my letter, scanned it, then laughed hard. He said quietly, "Oh, this is good." They looked terrified. Before I reveal everything that happened to me, go grab your copy of the audiobook, Brutal Cheating Stories That Shocked the World. It's raw, real, and 10 times wilder than what you're hearing right now. Link in the pinned comment. You know that feeling when everyone in the room thinks you're the idiot? Yeah, that was me on a Tuesday morning at 9:30, sitting in a courtroom that felt like someone had cranked the AC to Arctic tundra just to make sure everyone was as miserable as their marriages. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, and the wooden benches creaked every time someone shifted their weight. Which was often because apparently nobody in divorce court knows how to sit still when their life is imploding. Across from me sat Sabrina Foster, soon to be Sabrina. I'm single and loaded Foster if she had anything to say about it. My soon-to-be ex-wife and certified corporate ice queen. She was wearing this slate gray designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, paired with those criminally sharp Louis Vuitton heels that could double as weapons in a street fight. Her hair was pulled back in that severe bun she always wore to important meetings, which apparently now included the systematic destruction of my financial future. She had this smirk plastered across her face, the kind of smirk that said she'd already mentally spent my half of everything on a beach house in the Hamptons. Next to her sat Grant. Yes, that Grant, her personal trainer turned boyfriend. Because nothing says sophisticated businesswoman like trading in your husband for a guy whose most complex thought of the day is deciding between protein shake flavors. He was squeezed into a navy suit that looked like he'd bought it from the big and uncomfortable section of Men's Warehouse. And he kept tugging at his collar like the fabric was personally attacking his neck. Every few seconds, he'd flex his jaw or adjust his shoulders, probably forgetting he wasn't at the gym posing for Instagram selfies with motivational quotes about grinding and hustling. And then there was Elaine, Sabrina's mother, the woman who'd never liked me from day one because apparently I didn't come from the right kind of family, which I think was code for, "You're not rich enough for my princess." She was perched on the bench behind Sabrina like she was sitting front row at Fashion Week sipping a Vinny Caramel macchiato with extra whip from Starbucks because, God forbid, she go 2 hours without her overpriced coffee fix. She had that look, you know, the one where everything about her screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," mixed with, "My daughter can do no wrong, even if she burns down an orphanage." The energy in that room was thick enough to cut with a knife. And not just because of the tension. Sabrina's lawyer, this silver-haired shark named Richard Blackwell, who probably charged $500 just to answer his phone, kept shuffling papers importantly, like he was handling a Supreme Court case instead of a divorce between two people who couldn't stand to be in the same zip code anymore. He had that smug attorney energy, the kind that makes you want to ask if his law degree came with a complimentary superiority complex. My lawyer, on the other hand, looked like he was about 3 seconds away from a nervous breakdown. Gerald Preston was a nice enough guy. Mid-50s, thinning hair, wore the same brown suit to every meeting like it was his superhero costume. But let's just say courtroom intimidation wasn't exactly his strong suit. He kept wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, even though the room was freezing. And every time Blackwell made a statement, Preston would glance at me with these puppy dog eyes that screamed, "Please tell me you have something up your sleeve because we're getting murdered here." The judge, Honorable Patricia Moreno, sat up at her bench looking like she'd rather be literally anywhere else. She had that exhausted expression that all family court judges develop after years of listening to people fight over microwaves and who gets custody of the designer ottoman. She kept glancing at the clock, probably counting down the minutes until her lunch break, when she could escape to the chambers and pretend that human beings were capable of being reasonable. Sabrina leaned over to Grant at one point, making sure her voice was just loud enough for me to hear, and whispered, "You'll never touch my money again." Her perfectly manicured hand rested on his forearm like she was marking her territory. Grant, bless his beautiful empty head, nodded enthusiastically and added, "That's right, sweetheart." Like he'd just contributed something profound to the conversation, instead of stating the painfully obvious. I swear to God, if arrogance were currency, these two would be running their own mint. They'd be printing money faster than the Federal Reserve, and probably be equally as corrupt. I almost laughed out loud right there in the courtroom. Almost. But I kept my composure, sitting back in my chair with my hands folded calmly in my lap, like I was waiting for a bus instead of sitting through the most expensive breakup of my life. See? Here's the thing that Sabrina and her discount Kendall didn't know. I wasn't scared. Nervous? Sure, a little annoyed. Absolutely. But scared? Not even close. Because sitting on the table in front of Preston in a crisp white envelope that looked innocent enough to contain a birthday card from Grandma was something that was about to turn this entire circus upside down. That envelope contained the kind of information that makes federal agents get excited and CEOs get attorneys. Real attorneys, the expensive kind who specialize in "please don't let me go to prison" cases. Sabrina's lawyer was mid-sentence, going on about my lack of contribution to the marriage and my financial dependence on his client, which was rich considering I'd been the one pulling all-nighters, building her company's infrastructure while she was busy networking at cocktail parties and taking credit for other people's ideas. Blackwell had this way of talking that made everything sound like an accusation, like he was personally offended that I had the audacity to exist in his courtroom. The judge looked bored, flipping through papers with the enthusiasm of someone reading terms and conditions on a software update. Preston looked like he was sweating through his shirt. Elaine was scrolling through her phone, probably texting her country club friends about how she was watching her daughter destroy that deadbeat husband in court. But me, I looked calm, collected, maybe even a little amused, because I already knew what was coming. I knew what was inside that envelope, and more importantly, I knew what it meant. After 8 years of marriage to a woman who thought she was untouchable, after months of being called useless and worthless and every other less in the dictionary, I was about to watch everything unravel in the most beautiful way possible. Grant whispered something to Sabrina that made her smile, and she shot me a look that said, "You're finished." Her mother raised her coffee cup in a mock toast, like this was some kind of celebration. I just smiled back. Let them have their moment. Let them think they've won. Let them believe that the boring, forgettable husband was going down without a fight. Because in about 45 minutes, that white envelope was going to crack open their perfect little world like an egg, and I was going to enjoy every single second of watching the yolk run all over their designer clothes. The judge cleared her throat. "Mr. Blackwell, are you finished with your opening statements?" "Yes, Your Honor," he said smoothly, sitting down with the confidence of a man who thinks he's already won. Preston looked at me. I nodded. It was showtime. Let's rewind the tape, shall we? Back to a time when I was young, dumb, and apparently suffering from some kind of temporary blindness that made me think I'd hit the jackpot in the marriage lottery. Picture it 7 years ago, standing at the altar in a venue that cost more than a decent used car. watching Sabrina walk down the aisle in a dress that probably required its own insurance policy. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread, which makes sense now considering her entire life was basically one long photo shoot for an audience that didn't actually exist. I thought I'd married my dream woman. Confident? Check. Brilliant. Double check. Charming enough to sell ice to Eskimos and make them thank her for the privilege. Oh, absolutely. Sabrina Foster back then. Sabrina Chun was the kind of woman who walked into a room and made everyone else feel like supporting characters in her personal movie. She had this way of talking that made even mundane things sound important. Like she could describe her lunch order and somehow make it sound like a TED Talk about innovation and disruption. She was the CEO of Silverline Consulting. This boutique management firm that specialized in strategic optimization and corporate synergy, which I'm pretty sure is business speak for. We tell companies what they already know, but charge them 6 figures to hear it from someone with an MBA. Here's the kicker though. The company that she loved to brag about, building from the ground up with nothing but vision and determination. Yeah, I was there from day one. Not as some passive cheerleader husband, but as an actual founding partner who did everything except get credit for it. When we started Silverline, we were working out of our cramped 1-bedroom apartment in Queens. The kind of place where the walls were so thin you could hear the neighbors arguing about who forgot to buy milk. Sabrina would be on sales calls working her magic and convincing potential clients that we were the answer to all their corporate prayers, while I was hunched over my laptop building the actual infrastructure that would make those promises a reality. Marketing campaigns. That was me staying up until 3 hours in the morning designing logos and writing copy that made us sound like we'd been in business for decades instead of 3 weeks. Accounting and financial systems. Also me teaching myself QuickBooks through YouTube videos and hoping I wasn't accidentally committing fraud through ignorance. Client deals, we split those down the middle. She'd wine and dine them at restaurants we couldn't actually afford, putting everything on credit cards and praying the deals would close before the bills came due, while I'd be back at the apartment preparing presentations and proposals that actually delivered on her promises. We were a team partners. She used to call me her partner in crime, usually late at night when we'd be celebrating landing a new client with cheap champagne and takeout Chinese food, laughing about how we were totally winging it and somehow getting away with it. Those were good times? I'm not gonna lie. There was something exciting about building something from nothing, about being young and broke and stupid enough to think we could actually pull it off. Sabrina had this energy back then, this infectious enthusiasm that made you want to work harder, do better, be part of something bigger than yourself. When she looked at you with those dark eyes and told you that you were essential, that the company couldn't exist without you, you believed it. I definitely believed it. Then Silverline actually started making money. Real money. The kind of money that means you can move out of Queens and into a trendy loft in Tebeka. The kind of money that means Sabrina could buy those designer suits and start getting invited to industry conferences as a speaker instead of just an attendee. And somewhere between our 3rd year and our 5th year, something shifted. Actually, that's not quite right. I shifted. Or rather, my role in Sabrina's narrative shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't the partner in crime anymore. I became the husband who doesn't understand business, which was hilarious considering I'd structured half our biggest deals and designed the entire back-end system that kept the company running. But Sabrina had discovered something crucial. Nobody wants to hear about the boring operational stuff. Nobody writes Forbes articles about the guy who makes sure payroll runs on time and client contracts are airtight. They write articles about visionary female CEOs who disrupted their industry through sheer force of will and natural business instinct. So that's the story she started telling. Silverline became her company built through her vision, her leadership, her brilliant strategic mind. In interviews, and there were a lot of interviews once she hired a PR firm to boost her profile, she'd occasionally mention my supportive husband like I was some kind of accessory, a +1 who stood quietly in the background and occasionally helped with minor tasks when she was too busy changing the world. The Forbes cover was the turning point. They shot it in our loft, and then I remember watching the photographer position Sabrina next to our floor, toe-ceiling windows with the Manhattan skyline behind her, looking every bit the powerful executive who'd conquered the business world through sheer determination. The headline was something like, "The New Face of Management Consulting, How Sabrina Foster Built an Empire." I was at work during the shoot, naturally handling a client crisis that she'd promised to deal with, but then delegated to me via text message. When the issue came out, she threw a party, invited every important person in our network, plus some B-list influencers and a reporter from a business blog. The magazine was displayed on easels throughout the apartment like it was fine art. People congratulated her, told her how inspiring she was, asked her advice on entrepreneurship. I spent most of the party in the kitchen making sure the catering staff had everything they needed and refilling drinks. At one point, someone asked Sabrina how she'd built Silverline, and I'll never forget her answer. Honestly, it was just me and my laptop and a dream. I worked 18-hour days for years, sacrificed everything, and slowly built it into what you see today. I literally dropped the bottle of wine I was holding. Luckily, it was over the sink. She didn't mention my name once that entire night, not once. I'd become invisible in my own life story, edited out like a deleted scene that didn't test well with audiences. From that point on, the transformation accelerated. She started calling me babe, but only when other people were around, like she was performing the role of loving wife for an audience. In private, the pet names got significantly less affectionate. Burden was a favorite. So was deadweight. Once during an argument about why I'd questioned one of her business decisions, a decision that later cost us a major client, she called me professionally irrelevant. That one stung, not going to lie. The thing about living with someone who's rewriting history is that you start to question your own memory. Did I really do all that work, or was I exaggerating my contributions? Was I actually essential to building Silverline? Or was I just the support staff that every CEO needs? Sabrina was so good at gaslighting that sometimes I'd catch myself wondering if maybe she was right. Maybe I was just the guy who helped out while she did the real work. But then I'd remember those early days, those 3 a.m. brainstorming sessions, those client presentations I'd written, those financial models I'd built, and I'd realize, nah, I wasn't crazy. She'd just gotten really good at lying, especially to herself. Our marriage became a PR exercise. We'd show up to events together, her in designer, everything. Me and the nice suit she'd bought me because apparently my old ones weren't sending the right message. We'd smile for photos, her hand resting on my arm in that casual but possessive way that said, "Yes, I have a husband. No, he's not important enough to introduce individually." We'd laugh at the right moments, nod thoughtfully during speeches, play the part of the successful power couple. Then we'd get home, and she'd immediately drop the act like an actress stepping off stage. She'd kick off her heels, pour herself wine, and start complaining about whoever had annoyed her that evening while I'd hang up our coats and wonder when exactly I'd become a prop in someone else's production. Love's beautiful, isn't it? At least until you realize you're not married to a person, you're married to a press release. Looking back, the signs were about as subtle as a neon billboard in Times Square, but you know how it is when you're living in the middle of something. You don't see the forest because you're too busy staring at the trees, wondering why they're all suddenly wearing cheap cologne and lying to your face. The downward spiral of my marriage didn't happen overnight. It was more like a slow-motion car crash where everyone can see the disaster coming except the poor idiot behind the wheel. And spoiler alert, I was that idiot. It started small, the way these things always do. Missed dinners became a regular occurrence, which wasn't totally unusual given that Sabrina ran a consulting firm and sometimes client emergencies actually were emergencies. But there's a difference between, "Sorry, honey, the Johnson account is imploding and I need to put out fires and I'll be home late. Don't wait up." Sent via text at 7 p.m. when she promised to be home by 6 m. The excuses piled up faster than dirty laundry. Late meetings, emergency strategy sessions, networking events she absolutely couldn't miss. Drinks with potential clients who only had availability at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. I'm not an idiot. Well, okay, I was being an idiot. But I'm not a complete idiot, so I noticed. How could I not? The woman who used to complain about having to attend one evening event per month was suddenly booked solid 4 nights a week. She'd come home smelling like expensive wine and something else. Something that definitely wasn't her usual Chanel No. 5. It was heavier, muskier, the kind of scent that screamed, "I made poor decisions at a bar that has bottle service." Then there was the phone thing. Sabrina had always been attached to her iPhone like it was a life support system. But suddenly she was guarding that thing like it contained nuclear launch codes. She'd take it to the bathroom, sleep with it under her pillow, and practically have a heart attack if I walked into the room while she was texting. The screen was always tilted away from me. And she developed this nervous habit of closing whatever app she was using the second I got within viewing distance. "Work stuff," she'd say whenever I raised an eyebrow. "Confidential client information, NDA things. You wouldn't understand, right?" Because I definitely hadn't spent years handling confidential client information myself. "But sure, Sabrina, your text messages at 11 p.m. on a Saturday are definitely about quarterly projections and strategic initiatives." Enter Grant Matthews, the catalyst for my wife's midlife crisis, and quite possibly the dumbest human being I've ever had the misfortune of meeting. Grant was Sabrina's personal trainer from the executive gym in her office building. One of those places where corporate types go to pretend they're athletic, while actually just walking on treadmills and checking their email. He was exactly what you'd picture. 6'2", muscles on top of muscles, a jawline that could cut diamonds, and the intellectual depth of a kiddie pool in July. Sabrina had started going to the gym religiously about 6 months before everything fell apart, which should have been my first clue because the woman I married thought exercise was a form of medieval torture. Suddenly, she was up at 5:30 a.m. for morning training sessions and staying late for evening workout classes. She bought an entirely new wardrobe of athleisure wear. Those expensive Lululemon leggings and sports bras that cost more than actual business clothes, and started talking about fitness goals and wellness journeys like she'd been body swapped with a lifestyle influencer. I should have known something was up when she started coming home from the gym looking like she'd barely broken a sweat. Her hair would still be perfect, her makeup only slightly smudged. And she'd be glowing in that particular way that has nothing to do with cardio and everything to do with endorphins of a completely different variety. The first time I actually saw them together was pure accident. I'd left my laptop at the office, the home office we'd set up in what used to be our guest room before Sabrina decided she needed that space for her executive meditation practice, which I'm pretty sure was code for place to take private calls away from my husband. I drove to Silverline's building around 7 p.m., figuring I'd grab the laptop real quick and maybe pick up Thai food on the way home. That's when I saw them in the parking garage, Sabrina and Grant, standing next to her Tesla, close enough that they were basically breathing the same air. She was laughing. That genuine head-thrown back laugh that I hadn't heard directed at anything I'd said, in probably 2 years. Her hand was on his chest, and his hand was on her waist, and they were looking at each other like they were the only two people in the world. I sat in my car, 3 rows back, watching this rom-com scene play out in real time. He said something. She laughed again, and then she playfully pushed his shoulder in that flirty way that women do when they want you to know they're definitely not pushing you away. He caught her hand, held it for a second too long, and then, because apparently they thought parking garages have the same privacy as soundproof bunkers, he leaned in close and whispered something in her ear that made her blush. My wife blushing. Because of a man whose greatest accomplishment was probably benching 250 lbs and spelling his own name correctly on gym membership forms. I watched them for about 5 minutes, just sitting there in my Honda Civic like a character from a depressing indie film about suburban disappointment. Part of me wanted to march over there and cause a scene, maybe punch Grant in his stupidly perfect face. Definitely ask Sabrina what the hell she thought she was doing. But another part of me, the smarter part, the part that had been slowly waking up to the reality of my marriage, told me to stay quiet, stay calm, and pay attention. So I did. I took out my phone, snapped a few photos from a distance, and watched as they finally separated her getting into her car, and watching her drive away with the dopey expression of a golden retriever who'd just been told he's a good boy. When Sabrina got home an hour later, an hour, mind you, when the drive from the office takes 20 minutes max, she waltzed in talking about traffic and errands. I was on the couch, laptop open, pretending to work. "Hey, babe," she said, barely looking at me. "Sorry I'm late. Had to stop by the office to grab some files, then got caught up chatting with some colleagues in the parking lot. You know how it is. Networking never stops." "Networking?" I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "In the parking lot?" "Yeah. Ran into some people from the gym. You wouldn't know them. Business stuff." She kicked off her heels and headed for the bedroom. "I'm going to shower." Of course she was. Had to wash off the scent of bad decisions and cheaper cologne. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. The girls' nights that she'd been claiming to attend with her work friends. Yeah. Those friends started posting Instagram stories from wine bars and restaurants on the exact night Sabrina said she was with them. And surprise, surprise, she wasn't in any of the photos. The late-night client emergencies started happening with suspicious regularity, always on nights when I'd mentioned wanting to talk about our relationship or suggesting we do something together. And Grant, God. Grant was everywhere suddenly. She'd mentioned him casually in conversation. Oh, Grant suggested this new protein shake place. Or Grant says I'm making amazing progress with my fitness goals. Or my personal favorite. Grant thinks I should focus more on self-care and not let other people's negativity drag me down. That last one was clearly directed at me, by the way, in case you missed the subtext. The thing that killed me wasn't even the cheating itself. Although, yeah, that sucked like getting punched in the stomach by someone wearing brass knuckles. It was the sheer laziness of it all. She wasn't even trying to be discreet. She'd started dressing differently, doing her hair in this way that Grant had apparently complimented, wearing perfume. She'd never worn before because it's more sophisticated. She bought new lingerie. I know because I do the laundry, and suddenly there were lace things showing up that I'd definitely never seen her wear. And started going to bed with full makeup on like she might need to look camera ready at any moment. But here's the thing. I played dumb Academy Award level dumb. Every time she mentioned Grant, I'd nod along pleasantly. When she came home late, I'd ask how her evening was with genuine interest. when she said she needed space and time to find herself. I agreed that self-discovery was important and offered to give her all the space she needed. Because here's what I'd learned from watching too many crime documentaries and revenge movies. The smart guys in those stories don't react immediately. They don't blow up and cause drama. They sit back, they observe, they gather information, and they wait for exactly the right moment to strike. Sabrina thought I was clueless. Grant probably thought I didn't exist. They were so wrapped up in their little affair, so convinced of their own cleverness that they didn't notice I'd stopped being hurt and started being strategic. Let them have their parking lot rendezvous. Let them think they were getting away with something. I was building a case. Sabrina loved her secrets the way some people love their pets. She kept them close, fed them regularly, and got irrationally defensive when anyone got too curious about what she was hiding. Our home had always been divided into territories. My space, her space, and the neutral zones where we'd occasionally cross paths and pretend we still liked each other. But her home office, that was Fort Knox wrapped in caution tape and sprinkled with passive-aggressive do not disturb energy. She had passwords for everything. Her laptop required a fingerprint scan plus a 12-character password that she changed monthly. Her phone had facial recognition, plus a 6-digit code that I'm pretty sure was different every other week. She kept her office door locked when she wasn't in there, which seemed excessive for someone who was supposedly just doing legitimate consulting work, unless legitimate consulting work was code for definitely doing crimes and doesn't want witnesses. The filing cabinet in her office, this sleek black monstrosity that probably cost more than my first car, had one of those fancy combination locks that you'd see in movies about bank heists. Her desk drawers were locked. Even her computer browser had a master password that locked everything down tighter than a nuclear facility. For someone who claimed to have nothing to hide, she sure spent a lot of energy hiding things. But here's the beautiful thing about people who think they're smarter than everyone else. They get sloppy, not immediately, and not in obvious ways, but eventually the cracks start to show. They get comfortable, they get confident. They start to believe their own hype about being untouchable. And that's when they make mistakes. My mistake discovery moment came on a Wednesday afternoon about 2 weeks after I'd seen Sabrina and Grant's parking garage love fest. She'd texted me that morning saying she'd be gone all day. Leadership Summit in Connecticut. Won't be home until late. Don't wait up. The Leadership Summit thing was her new favorite excuse. Probably because it sounded important and vague enough that I couldn't easily verify it. Spoiler alert, there was no Leadership Summit. There was, however, Grant's apartment in Hoboken, which I confirmed through the magic of Find My Phone and Sabrina's inability to remember that we'd set up family sharing 2 years ago for safety reasons. So, there I was, home alone on a Wednesday, staring at my wife's locked office door like it was the entrance to Narnia. I'd never been the snooping type. Honestly, I'd always thought going through your partner's stuff was a violation of trust and privacy. But then again, I'd also thought my wife wasn't sleeping with a guy whose vocabulary peaked at Gainsborough. So clearly, my judgment about appropriate behavior was due for a recalibration. The office door lock was one of those standard interior door locks, the kind that you can pop open with a butter knife if you're determined enough. Which I was very determined. Possibly the most determined I'd been about anything in years. I grabbed a flathead screwdriver from the kitchen junk drawer, jimmied the lock. Thank you. YouTube tutorial I'd watched 3 days earlier during a bout of suspicious insomnia and stepped into Sabrina's inner sanctum. The office looked like something out of a CEO's Instagram feed. Minimalist desk with a laptop and one of those expensive desk lamps that's basically modern art. Floor toe-siling bookshelves filled with business books she'd definitely never read. I know because I'd read half of them and they didn't have a single cracked spine. and that ridiculous motivational poster that said disrupt or be disrupted in aggressive sans serif font. There was a photo of us on her desk from our wedding day, which felt ironic considering she was currently disrupting our marriage by sleeping with someone who thought Synergy was a type of energy drink. I started with the desk drawers, which were predictably locked. More buttern, more YouTube-educated lockpicking, and boom, I was in. The first 2 drawers were boring. Office supplies, business cards, about 40 different types of fancy pins that she definitely didn't need. But the bottom drawer was where things got interesting. There were folders, not digital files, but actual physical manila folders, like she was cosplaying as a character from a John Grisham novel. The first folder I pulled out was labeled Secondary Accounts in Sabrina's precise handwriting, which should have been my first clue that we weren't dealing with normal business documents. Secondary accounts. What happened to primary accounts? Why do we need secret backup accounts? I opened the folder and found bank statements. Lots of bank statements for accounts I'd never heard of at banks I didn't even know existed, in names that definitely weren't Sabrina Foster or Silverline Consulting. There was an account under SC Holdings LLC, creative with a balance that made my eyes water. We're talking 6 figures just sitting there, money that had apparently been funneled out of Silverline's main accounts through a series of transactions labeled things like consulting fee, strategic partnership payment, and my personal favorite, Executive Development Fund. The second folder was labeled Invoice Archive, which sounds boring until you actually look at the invoices and realize they're faker than a $3 bill. Invoices to companies I'd never heard of for services that sounded made up. Synergistic brand optimization for $45,000. Comprehensive market penetration analysis for $38,000. Strategic alignment consultation for $52,000. The vendor listed on all these invoices, SC Holdings LLC, the same shell company that had those mysterious bank accounts. My wife wasn't just cooking the books, she was running a whole damn restaurant. I kept digging, pulling out folder after folder like I was on an archaeological expedition into financial fraud. There were documents for other shell companies. Foster Strategic Solutions, Chun Consulting Group, that was her maiden name. Real creative there, Sabrina and Metropolitan Business Advisors. Each company had its own set of bank accounts, its own collection of fake invoices, its own paper trail of money being moved around like a very expensive shell game. But the real jackpot was in the 4th folder, the one marked Personal, which should have just been regular receipts and expense reports. Instead, I found purchase records for things that definitely weren't business expenses, unless Silverline Consulting had suddenly pivoted into luxury retail. A Rolex Submariner for $12,000, purchased 8 months ago, labeled as a client gift on the expense report. Funny thing though, I'd never seen that watch in our house, and I'd definitely never seen it on any of our clients' wrists during meetings. There were more receipts, designer handbags, jewelry from Tiffany's, a weekend stay at some boutique hotel in the Berkers that coincided exactly with one of Sabrina's girls' weekends that she told me about. Except according to the hotel booking, it was a reservation for 2 under the name Grant Matthews. Subtle, real subtle. I sat there on her expensive ergonomic office chair, the one she'd spent $800 on because apparently her back required premium lumbar support, just staring at this mountain of evidence. My brilliant, beautiful, successful wife was a fraud. Not metaphorically, but literally, legally, go directly to jail. Do not pass, go kind of fraud. She'd been siphoning money from her own company, creating fake vendors to pay herself through backdoor channels, and using Silverline's accounts as her personal piggy bank. The accountant in me, the part that had actually helped set up Silverline's original financial systems, was honestly impressed by the complexity of it all. She'd created an entire ecosystem of fake companies and fraudulent transactions, layered everything just enough to avoid immediate detection, and kept it running for what looked like at least 3 years based on the date stamps on the documents. The husband and me felt like I'd been punched in the stomach and then kicked while I was down for good measure. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Every bank statement, every fake invoice, every receipt for luxury purchases disguised as business expenses. I photographed the shell company and corporation papers, the account numbers, the transaction histories. My phone storage filled up so fast, I had to delete old apps to make room. But I didn't care. This was gold. This was ammunition. This was the evidence that would turn my divorce from a he said, she said nightmare into an open and shut case. There was one receipt that particularly caught my attention. Tucked into the very back of the personal folder like she tried to hide it, even within her hidden documents. It was for that $12,000 watch. And handwritten on the back in Sabrina's handwriting was a note to G for always pushing me to be my best self. Love always SG for Grant. Of course, she'd bought her gym rat boyfriend a $12,000 watch with money she'd embezzled from the company I'd helped her build. And she'd even had the audacity to write him a love note on the receipt. I laughed out loud in that empty office, a slightly unhinged laugh that probably would have concerned me if I'd been in a better mental state. But you know what? Sometimes when life hands you lemons, and those lemons are actually evidence of multiple felonies committed by your cheating wife, you just gotta laugh. I carefully put everything back exactly how I'd found it. Locked the drawers, locked the office door, and went to make myself a very strong drink. Tomorrow, I'd figure out what to do with my photographic evidence of white-collar crime. Tonight, I was just going to sit on my couch, sip my whiskey, and enjoy the fact that I finally had proof that I wasn't crazy. Sabrina had built herself a house of cards made of lies, fraud, and fake invoices. And I was about to be the gentle breeze that knocked the whole thing down. You know what's funny about having evidence of your wife's financial crime sitting on your phone? It's heavy. Not literally. iPhones weigh like 6.0 or whatever. But metaphorically, it feels like carrying around a brick made of consequences and future courtroom drama. I spent 3 days walking around with this digital bomb in my pocket trying to figure out what the hell to do with it. I couldn't exactly post it on Facebook with a caption like, LOL, my wife's a criminal. Thoughts? And I definitely couldn't confront Sabrina directly because she'd probably have time to destroy evidence and flee to a country without extradition treaties. What I needed was someone who could look at this mess and tell me whether I was sitting on actual prosecutable fraud or just really aggressive accounting that happened to look shady. Enter Leo Martinez, my college roommate and the only person I knew who got genuinely excited about tax code updates and forensic accounting procedures. Leo and I had been friends since freshman year at NYU when we'd bonded over our shared hatred of our economics 101 professor and our shared love of buffalo wings from this sketchy place on Bleecker Street that probably had multiple health code violations, but made wings so good you didn't care if you got food poisoning. After college, Leo had gone into forensic accounting. Basically, he was the guy companies called when they suspected their CFO was embezzling money or their accounting department was cooking books harder than Gordon Ramsay on a cocaine bench. He worked for some mid-sized firm in Midtown, spent his days elbow deep in spreadsheets and financial statements, and genuinely seemed to enjoy finding patterns and numbers that indicated someone was doing crimes. He was like a detective, but for white-collar stuff. And somehow he'd never lost that nerdy enthusiasm about catching people who thought they were smart enough to cheat the system. I called him on a Thursday morning, trying to keep my voice casual, like I was just checking in on an old buddy and definitely not about to dump evidence of financial fraud into his lap over coffee. Leo, man, it's been forever. You free for coffee sometime soon? Dude, yes. I'm so sick of talking to people who only want to discuss quarterly reports and tax implications. When and where? We met at this place in Chelsea the next morning. One of those coffee shops that tries way too hard to be hip. Exposed brick walls, vintage Edison bulbs hanging from the ceiling, a chalkboard menu with drinks that had names like The Capitalist Dream and Oat Milk Manifesto. The kind of place where a regular coffee costs $6, but comes with the satisfaction of knowing you're supporting local business or whatever helps you sleep at night. Leo showed up wearing what I can only describe as accountant casual khakis, a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and glasses that he'd had since college because they still work fine. Why would I replace them? He ordered some complicated latte situation with oat milk and an extra shot. I got a black coffee because I'm boring and also broke. And we grabbed a table in the corner, away from the aspiring screenwriters typing furiously on MacBooks. "So, what's going on?" Leo asked, stirring his fancy latte with one of those tiny wooden sticks that coffee shops use now instead of plastic because environmentalism. "You sounded weird on the phone. Everything okay?" I pulled out my phone, took a breath, and decided to just rip off the Band-Aid. "Sabrina and I are getting divorced." "Oh man, I'm sorry. That sucks." He looked genuinely sympathetic, which made me feel slightly guilty about what I was about to ask him to do. "Yeah, well, it gets worse or better, depending on how you look at it." I opened my Photos app and slid the phone across the table. I found some stuff in her office, financial stuff, and I need someone who actually knows about this crap to tell me if it's as bad as I think it is. Leo picked up the phone, squinted at the first photo, a bank statement for SC Holdings LLC, and his entire demeanor changed. His eyes got wider, his posture straightened, and I swear I saw his pupils dilate like a predator spotting prey. He started swiping through the photos faster and faster, occasionally zooming in on specific details or going back to cross-reference something from an earlier image. He went through probably 50 photos without saying a word, just making these little home and, "oh wow," noises that could have meant anything from "this is nothing to your wife is going to federal prison." The suspense was killing me. I sipped my coffee and tried not to look like a nervous wreck while my best friend reviewed evidence of my wife's crimes, like he was reading a particularly interesting novel. Finally, after what felt like 17 years, but was probably 10 minutes, Leo set the phone down, took off his glasses, cleaned them with his shirt, put them back on, and looked at me with this expression that was half impressed and half horrified. "Bro," he said slowly, "this woman is laundering money through her own company." I blinked. I figured it was bad, but laundering like Netflix documentary level laundering, exactly that level. He picked up the phone again, pulled up one of the shell company documents. "Look at this. She's created multiple fake vendors, paying them for services that don't exist, and the money's going into accounts she controls. Then she's moving it around between different shell companies to make it harder to trace. And these personal purchases," he whistled low, claiming them as business expenses. That's textbook fraud. The IRS would have a field day with this. My stomach did a weird flip that was equal parts satisfaction and holy crap. This is really happening. So it's prosecutable. Prosecutable. Dude, you're sitting on enough evidence to make the IRS send her flowers and a thank you card. This is like multiple felonies, wire fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement, money laundering. She's basically running a criminal enterprise disguised as a consulting firm. He leaned back in his chair, looking simultaneously excited and concerned. "How do you even find all this?" "She left for one of her leadership summits," I said, making air quotes with my fingers. which was actually her going to her boyfriend's apartment in Hoboken. So, I had some free time and a lot of built-up resentment. Her boyfriend. Leo's eyebrows shot up. Oh, this keeps getting better. Please tell me the boyfriend's involved in the fraud. Nah, he's just a gym trainer with the IQ of a protein shake. But she did buy him a $12,000 watch with embezzled money. So there's that. Leo laughed, that genuine belly laugh that made other people in the coffee shop turn to look at us. Oh man. I'm sorry about your marriage and everything, but from a forensic accounting perspective, this is beautiful. She documented everything. She kept paper trails. It's like she wanted to get caught. So what do I do with it? I asked because honestly, I had no idea what the protocol was for discovering your spouse was a white-collar criminal. Leo got serious then, leaning forward with his elbows on the table. You need to talk to law enforcement, specifically financial crimes. I know a guy, Detective Rivera, works in the financial crimes unit. He's good, he's thorough, and he takes this stuff seriously. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts. I can set up a meeting if you want. And what happens to me in all this? I helped build that company. I don't want to go down with her. That's why you're coming forward, Leo explained. You're not complicit. You discovered the fraud and you're reporting it. That's the right move legally. Plus, with this much evidence, they're not going to waste time investigating you when they've got her dead to rights. He paused. You'll probably have to testify eventually. Be prepared for that. Divorce proceedings plus a criminal trial. That's going to be messy. Messier than my marriage already is. Doubt it. We spent another hour going through the details. Leo explaining which pieces of evidence were most damaging, what prosecutors would focus on, how the investigation would probably unfold. He was in full forensic accountant mode, getting excited about ledger discrepancies and suspicious transaction patterns in a way that most people reserve for their favorite sports teams. By the time we left that coffee shop, I had a plan. Leo would connect me with Detective Rivera. I'd hand over all the evidence, and I'd cooperate fully with whatever investigation followed. Sabrina had spent years building her empire of lies and fraud, thinking she was untouchable, thinking she'd gotten away with it. She was about to learn that the boring husband she'd dismissed as financially irrelevant had just become the most relevant person in her life. Leo walked me to the subway, clapped me on the shoulder before we parted ways. For what it's worth, man, I'm sorry this happened. You deserved better than this. Yeah, well, I said, heading down the stairs into the station. At least I'll get a good story out of it. And possibly, if everything went according to plan, a significant portion of assets that were purchased with money that wasn't embezzled. Revenge is a dish best served with forensic accounting evidence and federal cooperation. Turns out playing secret agent in your own marriage is significantly less glamorous than James Bond movies make it look, and also way more emotionally exhausting than I'd anticipated. For the next 2 months, I lived what I can only describe as a double life. By day, I was the oblivious, soon-to-be ex-husband who nodded along when Sabrina complained about her stressful workload and her demanding clients. And by night, I was basically a discount version of Jason Bourne with a USB drive and a vendetta. Detective Rivera had been exactly what I needed. A middle-aged guy with salt and pepper hair, a perpetually tired expression, and the demeanor of someone who'd seen every possible variation of human stupidity and was no longer surprised by any of it. When Leo introduced us at a diner in Queens, because apparently all clandestine meetings about white-collar crime have to happen in diners. It's like a legal requirement. Rivera had looked at my phone full of evidence photos and said, Your wife's either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant. Maybe both. Definitely both, I confirmed. He'd set me up with proper equipment. A tiny recording device that looked like a regular pen, a thumb drive for copying files that had some kind of encryption software I didn't fully understand, and very specific instructions on how to gather evidence without technically breaking any laws or doing anything that would get thrown out of court later. Apparently, there's a whole art to legally gathering evidence of crimes being committed in your own house. And Rivera was teaching me the basics, like I was a freshman in Espionage 101. Don't break into anything you don't already have legitimate access to, he'd explained over terrible diner coffee. You live there, so you can be in common areas. Her office is trickier. Technically, shared marital space. But if she's got it locked and you pick the lock, that could be problematic. Stick to things that are in plain sight or that you can access without forced entry. What about recording conversations? New York's a one-party consent state, which means as long as you're part of the conversation, you can record it. But don't record her when you're not in the room. That's where you get into wiretapping territory, and nobody wants that. So began my career as a domestic spy. And let me tell you, it was the weirdest 2 months of my life. Every morning, Sabrina would leave for work in her perfectly pressed suits and her cloud of expensive perfume, kissing me on the cheek with all the warmth of someone completing a mandatory corporate training module. And the second her Tesla pulled out of our building's garage, I'd spring into action like a sitcom character. I'd pull out my phone and start documenting everything. Receipts she'd left on the kitchen counter, photographed and uploaded to a secure cloud storage that Rivera had set up for me, random notes. She'd scribbled on sticky pads, photographed her laptop if she'd accidentally left it open and unlocked, which happened more often than you'd think for someone running a criminal enterprise. Carefully examined, relevant files copied to my encrypted thumb drive. Browsing history screenshot, everything put back exactly as I'd found it. I bugged her office, not with actual surveillance equipment because that would have been illegal, but with my phone positioned on a bookshelf in recording mode during the rare times she took calls from home. I learned more about shell company management and money laundering techniques than I'd ever wanted to know. Sabrina had whole conversations with her accountant, a sketchy guy named Dennis, who definitely knew what was going on and was probably getting a cut about moving money between accounts and optimizing tax exposure, which is apparently white-collar crime speak for committing fraud. But make it sound boring. The best intel came from Grant, though, because that man could not keep his mouth shut to save his life. I started going to the same gym as him and Sabrina. Not their fancy executive gym, but the regular chain gym near our apartment that Grant also frequented, because apparently even personal trainers need to work out somewhere. I'd position myself on nearby equipment and just listen while he bragged to other gym bros about his CEO girlfriend and how she was totally loaded and keeps all the big payments off the books so the tax man doesn't take half. I recorded every word on my phone, sitting in the locker room pretending to scroll through social media while Grant detailed financial crimes to an audience of dudes who cared more about their bicep curls than corporate fraud. It was almost too easy. The man was a walking, talking, flexing confession. My favorite moment came when I accidentally ran into him at the protein shake bar. This ridiculous place that charged $12 for blended fruit and powder and struck up a conversation about relationships because apparently I'm a masochist who enjoys torture. Yeah, man, dating's tough, I said, playing the role of random divorced guy looking for advice. My ex-wife was all about money, you know, like I could never make her happy financially. Grant had laughed all confident and smug. Bro, I feel you. But like, if you find a woman who's already rich, problem solved. My girl, she's got her own money, her own business, doesn't need me for financial support. It's perfect. That's awesome, man. What's she do? She runs this consulting company, Silverline or something. Makes bank. He lowered his voice conspiratorially, leaning in like we were sharing state secrets. Between you and me, she's smart about it too. Keeps a lot of cash flowing through side companies, if you know what I mean. Less taxes, more profit. Genius, really. I'd nodded like this with sage wisdom and not a recorded confession to being an accessory to financial fraud. Smart. Very smart. The recording pin in my shirt pocket had captured every beautiful, incriminating word. At home, I played the perfect picture of domestic normally. When Sabrina came home late, which was most nights, I'd ask about her day with genuine interest. When she complained about difficult clients or stressful meetings, I'd make sympathetic noises and offer to order takeout so she wouldn't have to cook. When she mentioned Grant in conversation, which she did constantly because subtlety was apparently not her strong suit, I'd smile and nod, like I didn't know she was sleeping with him and that he was inadvertently helping build a federal case against her. One night, she came home particularly frustrated, threw her bag on the couch, and started ranting about a surprise audit that one of her clients had requested for their account. "Can you believe it?" she said, pouring herself a very large glass of wine. "They want to see detailed breakdowns of every charge, every expense, every consultation fee. Like, I don't have better things to do than justify every line item to some paranoid CFO who thinks everyone's trying to scam him." "That sounds stressful," I said, internally celebrating because a client audit was definitely going to uncover some irregularities. "It's ridiculous. I'm going to have to go through months of invoices and make sure everything." She stopped herself, took a long drink of wine, "Make sure everything looks consistent or is consistent, Sabrina. Because those are two very different things." I changed our Wi-Fi password one night while she was in the shower, just for my own amusement. The new password was, "Grant is a dummy 123 because I'm petty, and also because sometimes you need small victories to get through the day." She asked me about it the next morning, irritated that her phone hadn't connected automatically. "Oh yeah, I changed it," I said casually. "We were getting weird connection issues. I think someone might have been piggybacking on our network." She bought it without question, typed in the new password, and went about her day never realizing she was literally logging into a network that called her boyfriend an idiot. Every night after Sabrina fell asleep or pretended to fall asleep, I honestly couldn't tell anymore. I'd upload the day's evidence to Rivera's secure server. Bank statements, recorded conversations, photographs of documents, Grant's gym confessions, everything. Rivera and his team were building a case that would make prosecutors salivate, and I was the inside man making it all possible. "You're doing good work," Rivera told me during one of our weekly check-ins at increasingly depressing diners across Queens and Brooklyn. "We've got enough now to start seizure proceedings and press charges. The U.S. Attorney's Office is very interested in this case. How much longer do I have to keep this up?" I asked because, honestly, the stress of pretending everything was fine while secretly working with law enforcement was starting to wear on me. "Few more weeks, maybe a month. We want to make sure we've got everything before we move. Once we execute search warrants, she'll know something's up, and the divorce proceedings will get very complicated very fast." "They're already complicated. They're about to get worse," he said, not unkindly. "When we seize her assets and arrest her, you need to be prepared for fallout. She's going to know you were involved. This won't be subtle." I thought about Sabrina's face, that smug expression she wore whenever she thought she'd won something. And I smiled. "Good. I want her to know. I want her to know exactly who brought her down." Rivera had looked at me with something like respect. "You're colder than I expected when we first met, yeah." "Well," I said, finishing my terrible diner coffee. 8 years of marriage to a sociopath will do that to a person. By the time we had everything we needed, every document photographed, every conversation recorded, every shell company traced, every fraudulent transaction documented, I was exhausted, but also weirdly exhilarated. For months, I'd been treated like I was worthless, like I'd contributed nothing, like I was just dead weight in Sabrina's glamorous life. Turns out the dead weight had teeth, and those teeth were about to bite down hard. The divorce proceedings kicked off on a Monday morning that felt like the opening act of a particularly absurd Broadway show. Except the tickets were free, and the entertainment value came entirely from watching people's lives fall apart in real time. The courthouse was one of those buildings that looks intimidating on purpose. All marble columns and high ceilings, and the kind of architecture designed to remind you that the legal system is very serious and you should probably be scared. I wasn't scared, though. I was ready. I'd been ready for months. Sabrina's lawyer was a guy named Richard Blackwell. And if you looked up shark attorney in the dictionary, his photo would be right there next to the definition, probably photoshopped to make his teeth look even whiter. He was tall, silver-haired, wore suits that cost more than most people's monthly salaries, and had that particular brand of arrogance that comes from winning too many cases, and forgetting that sometimes David actually beats Goliath. He strutted into that courtroom like he was auditioning for the legal drama version of America's Next Top Model, his leather briefcase probably worth more than my car. Blackwell had made a career out of representing wealthy clients in messy divorces. And his strategy was always the same: paint the other spouse as incompetent, financially irresponsible, and completely dependent on his client's generosity. He was good at his job, I'll give him that. Within the first 15 minutes of opening statements, he'd managed to call me financially dependent, emotionally unstable, professionally inadequate, and a drain on my client's considerable resources. It was actually impressive how many ways he could say, "This guy's a loser," while using fancy legal vocabulary. Sabrina sat next to him, looking like she'd just stepped out of a photo shoot for powerful women who destroy their husbands monthly. She had this Navy Armani suit on that probably cost $3,000. Her hair pulled back in that severe bun that said, "I mean business, and also I have no soul." And she kept nodding along to Blackwell's character assassination like she was watching a particularly satisfying movie about someone she hated. Behind her sat Grant because apparently even divorce proceedings need a hype man. He was squeezed into what I'm guessing was his only suit. This ill-fitting Navy number that made him look like a high schooler attending his first funeral. He kept whispering encouragement to Sabrina. Little comments like, "You got this, babe," and he's going down. Completely oblivious to the fact that whispering in a quiet courtroom means everyone can hear you. The bailiff kept shooting him annoyed looks, but Grant was too busy playing supportive boyfriend to notice. And then there was Elaine, Sabrina's mother, sitting in the gallery like she had front row seats to her favorite show. She dressed for the occasion in what I can only describe as Real Housewives attend court. Designer everything, jewelry that could probably fund a small nation's economy, and sunglasses pushed up on her head even though we were indoors, and there was literally no sun to shield her eyes from. She had her phone out, probably live tweeting the proceedings to her country club friends about how she was watching her brilliant daughter take down that deadbeat husband. When Elaine took the witness stand because Blackwell had called her as a character witness, which should tell you everything you need to know about Sabrina's case. She delivered her testimony like she was accepting an Oscar. "My daughter deserves so much better than this," she said, gesturing vaguely in my direction like I was a piece of furniture she didn't approve of. He was always a burden. Never contributed anything meaningful to the marriage or to her success. Sabrina built that company entirely on her own while he just existed. The judge, Honorable Patricia Moreno, looked like she was already tired of everyone's nonsense, and we were only an hour into the proceedings. But she let Elaine continue her dramatic monologue about how I dragged Sabrina down and held her back from her true potential, and never appreciated what an amazing woman she was. I couldn't help myself. When Elaine paused for breath, I smiled sweetly and said, "Ayla, how's your Botox holding up? You're doing great for someone who's supposed to show expression while testifying." The courtroom went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a second. Blackwell's jaw literally dropped. Sabrina's eyes went wide. Grant stopped chewing his gum mid-chew, which was probably the first time he'd stopped chewing anything since he'd entered the building. And Judge Moreno. She pressed her lips together, like she was trying very hard not to smile. Looked down at her papers and said, "Mr. Foster, please refrain from commentary during witness testimony." "Yes, Your Honor. My apologies." But I wasn't sorry. Not even a little bit. Elaine's face had gone red. Well, as red as it could go given the Botox situation, and she sputtered through the rest of her testimony, clearly thrown off her rhythm. Blackwell tried to recover, asking leading questions about my pattern of disrespect and my obvious instability. But the damage was done. I'd shown everyone in that courtroom that I wasn't the broken, defeated husband they expected me to be. The proceedings continued with Blackwell parading out a series of witnesses who were supposed to testify to my general uselessness. Sabrina's assistant, a nervous 25-year-old named Jennifer, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, testified that she'd never seen Mr. Foster at the office, and that Miss Foster always handled everything herself. Which was technically true because Sabrina had banned me from the office about 2 years ago, claiming my presence was distracting to staff. But Blackwell conveniently left that part out. One of Sabrina's business associates, a pompous guy named Martin, who wore bow ties unironically, testified that he'd only ever dealt with Miss Foster on business matters and had no knowledge of any significant contributions from her husband. Again, technically accurate because Sabrina had systematically erased me from every client F-facing aspect of the business. But context wasn't really Blackwell's thing. They spent hours, literal hours, dragging my name through the mud, painting a picture of a man who'd contributed nothing, achieved nothing, and basically just coasted on his wife's success like a parasite. Lazy, useless, professionally incompetent, emotionally stunted. You name the insult, and Blackwell found a fancy legal way to say it. My lawyer, Gerald Preston, looked increasingly terrified as the day wore on. He kept glancing at me with these panicked eyes that screamed, "Please tell me you actually have something to counter this massacre because we're getting destroyed here." His hands were shaking slightly as he shuffled through papers, and I could see sweat stains forming under his arms, despite the courtroom's Arctic air conditioning. During a brief recess, Preston pulled me aside in the hallway, his voice low and urgent. "They're killing us in there. Blackwell's building a narrative that you're completely dependent on her financially, that you have no legitimate claim to any significant assets. If we don't counter this hard, you're going to walk away with nothing." I looked at him at his sweaty forehead and his nervous hands and smiled. "Relax, Gerald. Let them talk. Let them build their castle made of lies. The higher they build it, the more satisfying it'll be when it comes crashing down. You keep saying that, but trust me," I said, patting his shoulder. "That envelope you're carrying? That white envelope with a letter from Detective Rivera? That's our nuclear option, and we're about to launch it." Preston clutched the envelope like it was the Holy Grail. You're absolutely sure this will work?" "I'm not just sure," I said, watching through the courtroom windows as Sabrina laughed at something Grant said, completely confident in her impending victory. "I'm counting on it." After the recess, we filed back into the courtroom like actors returning for the second act of a play, where everyone already knew their lines. But nobody knew how it would end, except me. I knew exactly how it would end. And let me tell you, the anticipation was killing me in the best possible way. Judge Moreno settled back into her seat with the weary resignation of someone who'd rather be literally anywhere else. Probably at home watching reality TV and drinking wine, which honestly seemed like a better use of her time than listening to Blackwell drone on about my various inadequacies. Blackwell stood up again, smoothing down his already perfect tie, and launched into round 2 of "Let's destroy this man's reputation." He had financial documents spread across his table, printouts and spreadsheets that supposedly proved I'd contributed nothing of value to the marriage or to Silverline Consulting. He walked the judge through tax returns showing Sabrina's income versus my significantly smaller income from occasional freelance work. Bank statements showing that most of our household expenses came from accounts in Sabrina's name. Credit card bills that supposedly demonstrated my frivolous spending habits, which was rich coming from a woman who bought her boyfriend a $12,000 watch with embezzled funds. But I digress. "Your Honor," Blackwell said in that smooth, condescending voice that probably worked great on juries, but made me want to throw something. "The evidence clearly shows that Mr. Foster has been financially dependent on my client for the entirety of their marriage. He made minimal financial contributions, provided no substantial value to her business ventures, and essentially lived off her success while contributing nothing meaningful in return." Sabrina nodded along like a bobblehead on a dashboard, her expression a perfect mask of C. "I told you he was useless." Grant, sitting behind her, gave her a thumbs up, which was possibly the most idiotic thing to do in a courtroom, but perfectly on brand for him. Blackwell continued, pulling out more documents, building his case brick by brick. He had testimony from Sabrina's accountant, not Dennis the sketchy one, but her legitimate accountant who handled the non-criminal aspects of her finances, stating that I had no ownership stake in Silverline, no official position in the company, and no documented contributions to its formation or growth. He had statements from business partners who'd never worked with me directly. He even had a timeline showing how Silverline's growth had accelerated after I'd stepped back from involvement, as if my absence was the magic ingredient that made the company successful rather than, the fact that Sabrina had started cooking the books harder than a meth lab cooks. Well, meth. It was a masterclass in legal manipulation, taking facts and twisting them just enough to create a narrative that sounded believable if you didn't know the whole story. And the whole story was sitting in that white envelope on Preston's table, just waiting for its moment in the spotlight. Preston was sweating through his shirt. Now I could see the stains spreading under his arms like some kind of anxiety weather pattern. Every time Blackwell made a particularly damning point, Preston would glance at me with these desperate puppy dog eyes, silently begging me to tell him this was all part of the plan and not just us getting absolutely demolished in court. I gave him a small nod. "Patience, Gerald. All good things come to those who wait, and revenge is definitely a good thing." Judge Moreno looked increasingly bored as Blackwell continued his presentation. She'd started doing that thing judges do when they're trying to stay professional, but are internally screaming, checking her watch subtly, shuffling papers unnecessarily, occasionally glancing at the ceiling like she was praying for divine intervention or possibly a meteor strike to end the proceedings early. Elaine was loving every second of it, though. Every second. She sat in the gallery with this satisfied smirk, occasionally whispering to the woman next to her. Some country club friend she dragged along as moral support, or possibly just as an audience for her victory lap. Every time Blackwell scored a point, Elaine would do this little nod like, "Yes, that's my daughter destroying her worthless husband in court. Isn't she magnificent?" Finally, after what felt like 17 hours, but was probably 90 minutes, Blackwell wrapped up his argument. "Your Honor, given Mr. Foster's complete financial dependence on my client, his lack of contribution to the marital assets, and his general professional inadequacy, we're requesting that the court award him minimal settlement, no more than what's legally required under New York state law, which in this case would be essentially nothing given the prenuptial agreement they signed." Oh, right, the prenup. I'd almost forgotten about that little document we'd signed right before our wedding back when we were young and stupid. And Sabrina's parents had insisted on protecting her future assets. The prenup basically said that anything Sabrina made was hers. Anything I made was mine. And in the event of divorce, we'd each walk away with what we brought in, which sounded fair in theory. Except that theory didn't account for the fact that I'd helped build the company that made all her money, or that a significant chunk of her assets were acquired through literal crimes. Preston stood up finally, looking like a man about to either save the day or have a complete nervous breakdown. "Your Honor, if I may, present evidence that significantly alters the context of these proceedings." Blackwell rolled his eyes. "Your Honor, I failed to see what Mr. Foster's counsel could possibly present that would contradict the clear financial record." "Mr. Blackwell," Judge Moreno interrupted, and I swear I saw a flash of hope in her eyes that maybe something interesting was about to happen. Let's hear what he has to say. Preston picked up the white envelope with shaking hands, and I could see Sabrina's expression shift slightly from smug confidence to mild curiosity. Grant stopped chewing his gum. Elaine put down her phone. Even Blackwell looked vaguely interested, probably figuring this was just some desperate last-minute play that he'd easily knock down. "Your Honor," Preston said, his voice steadier than I expected, "I'd like to submit into evidence this letter from Detective Michael Rivera of the Financial Crimes Unit, along with supporting documentation regarding an ongoing federal investigation." The word federal hung in the air, like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet, but everyone knew was about to. Sabrina's smirk faltered just slightly, just for a second, but I saw it. That tiny crack in her perfect facade. Preston walked the envelope to Judge Moreno, and I watched as she opened it, pulled out the letter, and began reading. Her expression changed almost immediately. Her eyebrows went up, her eyes widened slightly, and then, impossibly beautifully, she started to smile. Not a polite courtroom smile, an actual genuine, "This is the most interesting thing that's happened in my courtroom all month" smile. She read through the first page, flipped to the second, and then, "And this is the moment I'll remember for the rest of my life." She actually laughed. A real laugh. Not loud, but definitely audible. The kind of laugh that says, "Oh, this is too good." Sabrina's face went pale. Grant looked confused, his jaw slightly slack like his brain was buffering and couldn't process what was happening. Elaine leaned forward, her smug expression replaced with something closer to concern. Blackwell stood up. "Your Honor, I object too." "Sit down, Mr. Blackwell," Judge Moreno said, still reading, still smiling. "You're going to want to hear this." She finished reading, took off her glasses, cleaned them slowly like she was savoring the moment, put them back on, and looked directly at Sabrina. "Mrs. Foster," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone of judicial satisfaction that comes from watching karma work in real time. According to this letter and the corroborating evidence provided by Detective Rivera of the Financial Crimes Unit, you've been under federal investigation for the past 2 months. The silence in that courtroom was deafening. The charges being prepared against you include money laundering, embezzlement, wire fraud, tax evasion, and falsification of business records. Judge Moreno paused, looking at the documents. I have to say, it's quite an impressive resume of financial crimes. Sabrina's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Blackwell looked like someone had just told him Santa wasn't real, and also his law degree was fake. Grant whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. Wait, what? Judge Moreno continued, and I swear there was joy in her voice. And Mr. Foster here has been cooperating with federal authorities for the duration of this investigation, providing evidence and testimony that will be used in your prosecution. All eyes turned to me. I smiled, waved slightly. There are FBI agents waiting outside this courtroom, Judge Moreno said, with a warrant for your arrest. And that's when everything exploded. The explosion wasn't literal. No actual pyrotechnics or Michael Bay special effects. But metaphorically speaking, that courtroom went up in flames faster than a warehouse full of fireworks on the 4th of July. The second Judge Moreno said the words, FBI agents and warrant for your arrest. The entire energy of the room shifted from boring legal proceedings to primetime television drama, and I was here for every single second of it. Sabrina's face went through about 17 different expressions in the span of 3 seconds. Shock, confusion, denial, anger, more confusion, panic. And finally landing on this pale, frozen mask of someone whose entire world was actively collapsing around them like a house made of cards in a wind tunnel. Her perfectly applied makeup suddenly looked garish against her newly white complexion, and her hands gripped the edge of the table so hard, her knuckles turned the color of printer paper. What? She managed to choke out, her voice cracking on that single syllable. What are you talking about? Judge Moreno held up the letter like she was presenting evidence on a crime show, which I guess technically she was. According to Detective Rivera's report, your husband first contacted law enforcement approximately 2 months ago with evidence of financial irregularities at Silverline Consulting. Since then, he's been cooperating fully with their investigation, providing documentation, recorded conversations, and testimony regarding your fraudulent business practices. Blackwell shot to his feet so fast, his chair rolled backward and hit the wall behind him. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We were given no notice of any criminal investigation. No opportunity to... Mr. Blackwell. Judge Moreno interrupted, and her voice had that sharp edge that meant she was done playing nice. Your client is about to be arrested for federal crimes. I suggest you focus less on procedural complaints and more on getting her a good criminal defense attorney, because she's going to need one. Grant, bless his simple heart, finally pieced together enough brain cells to form a thought. Babe, what's going on? He grabbed Sabrina's shoulder, and she flinched away from him, like his touch physically burned. What are they talking about? What investigation? Sabrina turned to look at me, and the expression on her face was something I'll treasure forever. Pure, unfiltered hatred mixed with disbelief and the dawning realization that she'd been played. Played by me, the worthless husband, the financial burden, the man she dismissed as too stupid to understand her brilliant business strategies. You, she hissed, and her voice was shaking with rage. You set me up, you lying, sneaking... Nah, I interrupted, leaning back in my chair with my arms crossed, going for maximum casual energy. I didn't set you up, Sabrina. You set yourself up. You're the one who created fake companies, laundered money, filed fraudulent invoices, and bought your boyfriend expensive watches with embezzled funds. I just brought popcorn and took notes. The courtroom erupted. Elaine stood up from her seat, pointing at me like I was personally responsible for ruining her daughter's life. Which I guess I kinda was. But she'd really done most of the heavy lifting herself. This is entrapment. This is illegal. You can't. Actually, ma'am, Judge Moreno said her patient's clearly running on fumes. What your daughter did was illegal. What Mr. Foster did was cooperate with a legitimate law enforcement investigation. There's a significant difference. Preston was standing next to me now, and I could practically feel the relief radiating off him like heat from a furnace. The man had probably aged 10 years during Blackwell's presentation, convinced we were about to get destroyed. And now he was watching it all reverse in the most spectacular fashion possible. He cleared his throat, trying to maintain professional composure despite looking like he wanted to do a victory dance. Your Honor, given these circumstances, I'd like to request that the court consider Mr. Foster's cooperation with federal authorities when determining the division of marital assets. Specifically, assets that were acquired through legitimate means should be protected for my client, while assets acquired through criminal activity should obviously be subject to seizure. Judge Moreno nodded, flipping through more pages of Rivera's report. According to this documentation, Detective Rivera's team has identified approximately 40% of Silverline Consulting's current holdings as having been acquired through legitimate business operations, operations that Mr. Foster had significant involvement in developing during the company's early years. Sabrina gasped. 40%, that's millions of dollars. Correction, I said, unable to keep the smile off my face. That's my millions of dollars. The money that came from actual work, actual clients, actual legitimate business deals that I helped structure. The rest, the stuff you embezzled and laundered. Yeah. The federal government's going to be keeping that as evidence and probably using it to pay your inevitable fines and restitution. Blackwell was frantically flipping through papers, looking for some legal precedent or loophole that would save his client. But you could see the panic in his eyes. This wasn't a case he could smooth talk his way out of. This was federal crimes with documented evidence and a cooperating witness. This was game over. Your Honor, I need time to consult with my client to review this evidence. 2. The courtroom doors opened and 3 people in FBI windbreakers walked in like they owned the place, which I guess in that moment they kind of did. The lead agent, a woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense expression of someone who'd arrested countless white-collar criminals and wasn't impressed by any of them, held up a badge. Sabrina Foster, she said, her voice carrying authority that made even Judge Moreno sit up straighter. Sabrina looked at the agents, looked at me, looked at Judge Moreno like maybe someone would wake her up from this nightmare. Nobody did. This was really happening. Sabrina Foster, the agent repeated, walking toward our table. You're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, embezzlement, and tax evasion. Grant jumped up, all protective boyfriend energy despite having absolutely no idea what to do in this situation. Wait, you can't just, she hasn't done anything wrong. This is all some misunderstanding. Sir, the second agent said, a tall guy who looked like he could bench press a small car. I'm going to need you to sit down and be quiet. Grant sat down so fast, you'd think someone had cut his strings. The lead agent pulled out handcuffs, and Sabrina finally found her voice again. Except instead of her usual controlled CO tone, it came out as a desperate shriek. This is insane. I built that company. I made it successful. Everything I did was legal. Ma'am, the agent said while efficiently securing the handcuffs around Sabrina's wrists. You have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you exercise that right. But Sabrina wasn't done. She turned to me, her eyes wild, her perfectly styled hair starting to come loose from that severe bun, and screamed, "You destroyed everything. You ruined my life. 8 years of marriage, and this is how you repay me." I stood up, walked around the table, and got close enough that only she could hear my next words. Knowledge is power, sweetheart. You spent years telling me I was too dumb to understand business, too irrelevant to matter, too worthless to contribute anything meaningful. Turns out I was smart enough to read financial statements, document your crimes, and work with federal investigators. You just never thought I was capable of it. Her face contorted with rage. I hate you. Yeah, I said, stepping back as the agents prepared to escort her out. I'm getting that impression. But here's the thing. You made the mistake of thinking the quiet husband was a stupid husband. I wasn't stupid, Sabrina. I was just waiting for the right moment. As they led her toward the door, Sabrina twisted around one more time, her voice carrying across the courtroom. You'll never get away with this. I have lawyers. I have connections. You have federal charges and about 5 years minimum in prison if you're lucky. I called back. But hey, look on the bright side. You'll have plenty of time to work on that leadership development you're always talking about. The agents escorted her out, and Grant tried to follow, but the third agent blocked his path. Sir, you need to stay here. We'll have some questions for you as well. Grant's face went from confused to terrified in record time. Questions? What questions? I didn't do anything. You accepted gifts purchased with embezzled funds, the agent said matter-of-factly. That makes you potentially complicit. Have a seat. Elaine was on her phone, probably calling every lawyer she knew, her voice shrill and panicked. My daughter has been framed. This is a setup. That man, she pointed at me. He's been planning this. He's vindictive. He's ma'am. Judge Moreno said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. Your daughter committed multiple federal crimes and was caught because she documented everything herself. The only thing Mr. Foster did was bring that documentation to the appropriate authorities. Now, please exit my courtroom before I hold you in contempt. Elaine stalked out, still ranting into her phone about lawyers and conspiracies and how this was all somehow my fault. The courtroom slowly emptied until it was just me, Preston, Judge Moreno, and a few stragglers who'd stayed to watch the show. Preston was grinning like he'd just won the lottery, which, I guess, professionally speaking, he kind of had. Judge Moreno looked at me, and there was something almost like respect in her eyes. Mr. Foster, in 20 years on the bench, I've never seen anything quite like this. I try to keep things interesting, Your Honor. She shuffled her papers together, shaking her head with a small smile. This court will reconvene in 3 weeks to settle the division of legitimate assets, given Mrs. Foster's current legal situation. I imagine she'll be somewhat preoccupied with her criminal defense. As I walked out of that courthouse into the bright afternoon sunshine that felt different somehow. Lighter, clearer, like someone had cleaned a window I'd been looking through for 8 years. I pulled out my phone and texted Leo. It's done. She's arrested. I'm free. His response came back immediately. Holy dude. Drinks tonight. You're buying since you're about to be rich. I laughed, an actual genuine laugh that came from somewhere deep in my chest. The courtroom erupted into chaos like someone had thrown a grenade made of consequences and federal charges. Sabrina shot to her feet so fast, her chair literally tipped over backwards with a crash that echoed off the marble walls. Her face had gone from confident CEO to cornered animal in about 3 seconds flat. And let me tell you, watching someone's entire world collapse in real time is simultaneously the most satisfying and most surreal thing I've ever experienced. You set me up, she hissed at me, her voice shrill enough to shatter glass. Her perfectly styled hair was already coming loose from that severe bun, little wisps escaping like her composure was physically unraveling. You lying manipulative, Mrs. Foster? Judge Moreno interrupted, her voice sharp enough to cut through Sabrina's meltdown. I suggest you stop talking immediately and contact a criminal defense attorney. Anything you say right now can and will be used against you. But Sabrina wasn't listening. She was staring at me with this expression of pure betrayal mixed with rage, like she couldn't comprehend how her useless, irrelevant husband had somehow orchestrated her downfall. How could you do this? After everything I built, after everything we had. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, and smiled. Nah, Sabrina. I didn't set you up. You set yourself up by, committing multiple felonies. I just brought the popcorn and took notes. Grant was still trying to process what was happening, his brain clearly working overtime to connect dots that were honestly pretty close together. He stood up, looking between Sabrina and the judge like someone had just explained quantum physics using only interpretive dance. Wait, so she's in trouble? Like serious trouble? Oh, incredibly serious trouble, I said helpfully. Money laundering, embezzlement, tax evasion. It's basically the greatest hits of white-collar crime. But don't worry, Grant. That watch she bought you with stolen money is probably evidence now. So the FBI will take good care of it. His face went pale. The watch. But she said that it was a gift. I finished. Yeah, it was a gift purchased with embezzled funds. You might want to lawyer up too, buddy. Accessory charges are a real thing. Grant actually tried to leave. He turned toward the exit like he was going to just walk out of the courtroom and pretend this wasn't happening. But the baif blocked his path with an expression that said, "Sit down, or I'll make you sit down." Elaine had gone completely silent for maybe the first time in her life. She sat frozen in her seat, her Starbucks cup forgotten in her hand, staring at her daughter like she was watching a stranger. The smug superiority had drained from her face, replaced by something closer to horror mixed with denial. I almost felt bad for her, almost. But then I remembered all those snide comments about me being a burden and a dead weight, and the sympathy evaporated pretty quickly. Blackwell was frantically whispering with Sabrina, probably trying to do damage control and figure out how his slam-dunk divorce case had just turned into a federal criminal proceeding. He kept glancing at the courtroom doors, like he was calculating whether he could ethically abandon his client mid-crisis. Judge Moreno nodded to the bailiff, who opened the courtroom doors. 4 FBI agents walked in with the kind of calm authority that comes from knowing you're about to arrest someone who absolutely deserves it. They were wearing those standard dark suits and serious expressions, and they moved through the courtroom like they'd done this 1,000 times before, which they probably had. The lead agent, a tall woman with her hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, approached Sabrina with handcuffs. "Sabrina Foster, you're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, embezzlement, and tax evasion. You have the right to remain silent." Sabrina looked at me one last time as they cuffed her. And if looks could kill, I'd have been a pile of ash on the courtroom floor. "You're going to regret this," she spat. I shrugged, doubtful. But hey, Federal prison has great Wi-Fi these days, I hear. You can keep up with your LinkedIn profile. As they led her toward the door, she was still screaming about injustice, about betrayal, about how I'd ruined everything. Grant was being questioned by another agent, looking like he was about to cry or throw up, or possibly both. And me. I just sat there watching my marriage officially end not with a whimper, but with federal arrests and Miranda rights. Judge Moreno looked at me, shook her head slightly with what might have been respect or amusement, and said, "Well, Mr. Foster, this is certainly the most interesting divorce case I've presided over. Happy to provide entertainment, Your Honor." The aftermath of Sabrina's arrest played out like the finale of a reality show, where the villain finally gets what's coming to them. Except this was real life, and the consequences were way more permanent than getting voted off an island. The FBI agents were professional and efficient, as they escorted Sabrina out of the courtroom in handcuffs. Her designer heels clicking against the marble floor one last time before she disappeared through those heavy oak doors that suddenly looked a lot like the entrance to her new reality. Grant had been pulled aside for questioning by one of the agents, a younger guy who looked like he was trying very hard not to laugh at Grant's increasingly frantic explanations about how he didn't know anything about any crimes and just thought she was a successful businesswoman. The agent was taking notes while Grant dug himself deeper with every word, mentioning the watch, the luxury hotel stays, the cash payments Sabrina had given him for training sessions that definitely weren't training sessions. Elaine finally found her voice, standing up with her phone already out, probably speed dialing every lawyer in her contacts. "This is a mistake," she announced to no one in particular, her voice shaking slightly. "My daughter is innocent. This is a setup, a conspiracy." "Ma'am," one of the agents said politely but firmly, "you might want to contact a criminal defense attorney for your daughter instead of making statements in a federal investigation." She sputtered, her carefully maintained composure cracking like old paint. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who my family is?" The agent looked supremely uninterested. "No, ma'am, and it doesn't really matter. Your daughter's been charged with federal crimes. I'd recommend focusing on that." Judge Moreno had moved on to the actual legal matters at hand because apparently even dramatic FBI arrests don't stop the machinery of divorce court. She looked at Blackwell, who was gathering his papers with the defeated energy of a man who knew his billable hours were about to get very complicated. "Mr. Blackwell, given the new information regarding your client's criminal activities, I'm inclined to revisit the asset distribution in this divorce." Blackwell cleared his throat, trying to maintain some professional dignity. "Your Honor, I'll need time to consult with my client and possibly withdraw from this case given the criminal proceedings." "That's fine," Judge Moreno interrupted. "But for the record, based on the evidence presented by Detective Rivera and the Financial Crimes Unit, it appears that a substantial portion of Mrs. Foster's assets were acquired through illegal means." She looked at the documents in front of her. "Mr. Foster, according to this report, you've been cooperating with federal authorities to trace which assets were purchased with legitimate income versus embezzled funds." Preston stood up, finally looking confident instead of terrified. "Yes, Your Honor. My client has provided extensive documentation showing his contributions to Silverline Consulting during its founding period, as well as identifying assets purchased before Mrs. Foster's criminal activities began." Judge Moreno nodded, flipping through pages. According to the financial analysis conducted by the FBI's forensic accountants, approximately 40% of the company's current holdings were acquired through legitimate means during the period when Mr. Foster was actively involved in building the business. 40%. The number hung in the air like a beautiful, beautiful fact. Given the prenuptial agreement and the circumstances of this case, Judge Moreno continued, I'm awarding Mr. Foster 40% of Silverline Consulting's legitimate assets. Those purchased with income earned before and separate from the fraudulent activities. The remaining assets will be frozen pending the criminal investigation and likely seized by federal authorities. I did the math in my head. 40% of Silverline's legitimate holdings was somewhere in the neighborhood of several million. Not buy a private island money, but definitely never worry about rent again and maybe take a really nice vacation money. Sabrina, who was being processed by the FBI agents near the doorway, heard the judge's ruling and absolutely lost it. That's my company, my money. You can't just give him millions of dollars that I earned. Mrs. Foster, Judge Moreno said with remarkable patience, the money you earned through fraud is being seized by the federal government. The money your husband helped you earn legitimately is being distributed according to his contributions to the business. I suggest you focus on your criminal defense rather than your divorce settlement. This is insane. Sabrina screamed, struggling slightly against the agents holding her arms. He did nothing. He contributed nothing. I built that company myself. I stood up unable to resist one final moment. Actually, Sabrina, I built the financial systems you used to commit fraud. I created the client database you exploited. I wrote the business plan you presented to investors. Knowledge is power, sweetheart. I paused, smiling. You just never thought I could read or count or apparently remember anything I'd actually done. Her face contorted with rage. You're going to regret this. When I get out, when this is all sorted out, you're looking at 5 to 10 years minimum, one of the FBI agents said matter-of-factly. Money laundering and wire fraud are serious federal offenses. I'd worry less about revenge and more about your legal defense. They let her out then, still screaming my name like a soap opera villain being dragged off set. Grant was being escorted out separately, probably to answer more questions about his $12,000 watch and whether he'd knowingly accepted stolen property. Elaine followed them both, her phone pressed to her ear, already spinning the story for whoever would listen. The courtroom cleared out slowly, spectators filing out with the satisfied energy of people who just witnessed some premium drama. Preston was packing up his briefcase, looking like he'd aged 5 years in one morning, but also like he'd just won the Super Bowl. I walked out of that courthouse into the afternoon sunshine, and I swear the light felt different, cleaner, somehow lighter. The weight I'd been carrying for months, hell, for years, had finally lifted. Sabrina lost her empire, her image, her freedom, and most importantly, her illusion of being untouchable. And me, I got my freedom, several $1 million, and one hell of a story that would probably end up as a true crime podcast episode titled something like The CEO Who Couldn't Keep Her Books Clean. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to Leo's number, and sent him a text. It's over. She's arrested. I'm rich. Drinks on me. His response came back immediately. Dude, I need every detail. Also, I told you forensic accounting was sexy. I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. Standing on the courthouse steps while former criminals and their terrible life choices got processed inside. Revenge isn't just a dish best served cold. Sometimes it's served with FBI agents, federal charges, and the sweet satisfaction of proving that the irrelevant husband was paying attention the whole time. If you think this is wild, you haven't heard anything yet. The real madness lives in my audiobook, Brutal Cheating Stories That Shocked the World. Click the link in the pinned comment and dive in. It is betrayal, exposure, and karma on full.